Reading the letters became like an intriguing mystery to me. I took careful notice of little comments Prabhupada would make about the leaders, specifically the governing body commissioners, GBC. For instance, Prabhupada's whole strategy changed dramatically in July of 1970. He freely started giving sannyas, celibate renounced order, to his male followers instead of encouraging them to marry. He stopped encouraging devotees to open temples and instead encouraged them to distribute books. And he began writing very heavy letters indicating that the character of many of his leading disciples was way below the mark. I have included these letters in chapter 2. They clearly show why Prabhupada became disgusted with these, quote, top men of the society, and ultimately why he decided to leave the planet early. Some persons may jump to the conclusion that I did this for gossip's sake or out of envy. This is not at all the fact. For one thing, I had to find out the real status of these men in order to go about rescuing my children. I didn't want to falsely accuse anyone. So it was essential that I knew the truth about these, quote, gurus, who are claiming absolute sovereignty over everyone, even to the point of thinking that they can kidnap their godbrothers' wives and children at whim. I had to know, were these men actually dear to Srila Prabhupada and spiritually advanced, or were they merely being given a big position to keep them out of trouble, not necessarily having any claim what to speak of monopoly on spiritual advancement? Needless to say, I found out. I soon found myself becoming enlivened again to preach. Many letters were to married men like myself, encouraging them to be bold and open temples. In the later years, when I joined the society, 1974, I had hardly even heard such things. That idea had more or less been replaced by emphasis on book distribution. Prabhupada actually discouraged opening many more temples at that time, since he was seeing that the ones he had already opened were being mismanaged and members were leaving almost as fast as they were coming. So even though I became inspired to open a temple, the difficulty was I wanted Prabhupada to be justly recognized all over the world, and not just where I and a handful of other ISKCON outcasts were preaching. So I decided, first, I must make these most vital and revealing letters available to everyone. Then they could also increase their desire to present Prabhupada's teachings instead of the bogus philosophy of these new, quote, gurus. By this time, I had realized that these men were actually the major source of Prabhupada's displeasure, despite what most of us had been led to believe. In one letter, Prabhupada actually said that they were not the real workers. So in a nutshell, the purpose of this book is fourfold. 1. It must be revealed to the world exactly who Srila Prabhupada is and how he has nothing whatsoever to do with the corruption going on amongst ISKCON's leaders today. That is what the media likes to print, and so that is what the people generally think is the real Hare Krishna movement. But Prabhupada's motive was pure. This is clearly evident when you see how he dealt with people in their strengths and weaknesses on a practical day-to-day basis. In other words, unlike the new, quote, gurus, he practiced what he preached. When this is seen, it will become next to impossible for persons who do not possess true spiritual realization and purity to, quote, fool the innocent public. Of course, many persons will continue to lump Srila Prabhupada in with these bogus gurus, but at least the sincere seekers will be able to understand who is who. 2. There is a crying need to increase and even rekindle love for Prabhupada from his own disciples. To a large extent, they have left Prabhupada's mission out of frustration and discouragement. These unscrupulous new, quote, gurus try to convince us that the majority of Prabhupada's disciples have left the society because they are all insincere. They are all insincere, lusty, envious, etc. They openly claim that the only real disciples of Srila Prabhupada are the ones who accept the new, quote, gurus as bona fide saints. This is nonsense. Prabhupada makes it very clear in his letters why 99% of the devotees leave the society. Quote, nasty, personal, motivated leaders. That's all. There is no other reason. With proper leadership, anyone can be happy and find shelter in Srila Prabhupada's real movement. The real movement is meant for the whole world, not just a small handful of religious zealots. But first there has to be real leaders. Unfortunately, because most of us are unable to turn the other cheek indefinitely, we could not and cannot constantly tolerate the behavior of these men, which is becoming progressively more and more satanic. They were the foremost cause of the disciples leaving ISKCON, even while Prabhupada was physically present, what to speak of now. So in reality, the loyalists who have stayed in ISKCON all these years supporting these, quote, gurus, in their game of imitate a saint, are the real offenders to the pure devotee, not so much those who simply go away in utter disgust. All of Srila Prabhupada's disciples and followers should again feel encouraged to take up the real mission of Srila Prabhupada. We must not let these bogus gurus discourage us any longer.